Good afternoon in New York and North America. Good evening in Europe and Africa. And welcome, whatever time of day or night, for all who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for MultiGenerational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our webinar on Intergenerational Legacies of Trauma in Kosovo, 25 years after the war and amid recent global conflicts. Today's International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma webinar is held on June 12 in observance of Kosovo's Liberation Day, the withdrawal of Serbian forces in 1999. Our multidisciplinary presenters will report and reflect on the intergenerational, multidimensional manifestations of war trauma in the Kosovo society during the past 25 years. I would like to acknowledge that today's webinar would not have happened without the help of Rabbi Joshi, who is our third presenter. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma, to ensuring victims' rights, to the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. As a psychohistorian, I conceive of history not only as a set of dates and events, but as it is lived and as it shapes our identities and guides our choices and lives today. Today, we have an extraordinary panel. Our first presenter, Dr. Feride Rushiti, almost needs no introduction. Founder and executive director of Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims, Dr. Rushiti is a pioneering human rights activist in Kosovo, known for advocacy that led to recognizing wartime sexual violence survivors and securing pensions for them. In March 2018, she received the United States Secretary of State's International Women of Courage Award. Throughout her career, she has initiated important laws and policies, aided marginalized groups, and setting examples globally for addressing collective trauma and wartime sexual violence. Our second presenter is Dr. Alireza Arenliu, a professor at the Department of Psychology and director of the Institute of Psychology at the University of Pristina, Kosovo. Alireza worked with WHO, the World Health Organization's mental health program, immediately after the war in Kosovo from 1999 to 2008. He earned his PhD in psychology at the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. From 2014 to 15, he was a D43 postdoc fellow at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He has also co-investigated NIH, that's United States National Institute of Health funded projects. Third is Rabbi Joshi, who I mentioned, a graduate of clinical psychology from the University of Pristina Raba holds a Master's of Science in Politics of Conflict, Rights and Justice from SOAS, University of London. Raba is a Fellow of Historical Dialogue and Accountability at Columbia University. She has conducted research on the multigenerational legacies of war trauma in Kosovo and has designed and implemented numerous projects focusing on the region's historical past. As I mentioned before, she was totally essential to organizing this webinar. Thank you already, Raba. Our fourth speaker is Jeta Reksa, with BA and MA in sociology from the University of Pristina. Jeta studied at the International Institute of Social Studies in The Hague and completed a fellowship in international gender studies at the University of Iceland. She co-authored works on subculture movements and state building. Jeta is a board member at the Program for the Gender Studies and Research, University of Pristina, and co-founder and executive directors of the Kosovo Oral History Initiative. Last but not least is Orion Krasnicki, born in January 1999 in Fushe, Kosovo. Orion experienced war's ravages firsthand. After family loss, he turned pain into peace mission. From 2019, he's taken steps to understand peace building and reconciliation. Since 2022, he has been actively engaged in educating others, both locally and internationally, fostering reconciliation and understanding of Kosovo's history and healing through local peace and the Youth Peace Ambassadors Network. We have 2 hours for the webinar. Each of our panelists will speak for about 10 minutes. Following an interchange among us, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience. We will then conclude with what we call last words. Please use the chat function and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can. Feel free to direct your question to a particular panelist or to the full panel. I now have the profound pleasure to offer the screen to Dr. Feride. Feride, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues from Kosovo, Raba, Aliriza, Jeta, Erion. It is my great honor that I stand before you today in a very special day, Kosovo Liberation Day, to share with you Legacy of Trauma, 20 years after the war, intergenerational trauma, and we are really very thankful for this opportunity to your personal involvement, Dr. Daniel, to Raba as well, but as well as to the International Center of Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma. As we are coming together, of course, not only to celebrate the freedom of Kosovo, but also to reflect deeply on our journey that brought us here to speak about collective trauma as well as intergenerational trauma. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to share with you. And in the beginning, I wanted just to give a little information about the context of Kosovo, how the war started, just for the audience to be familiar with the Kosovo context. I don't know if you have a good view of my presentation.
We are not seeing, are you sharing the screen?
Yes, I am trying to share. Let me see.
Okay.
So
very good.
It's fine now. I can continue.
It's perfect. Go ahead.
Yes. So here I brought you the map of Kosovo just for the distinguished audience to know where we are located. So Kosovo is located in the southeastern part of Europe, in the central part of the Balkan. It is in the border with Albania in southwest, while with Macedonia in the south, Montenegro in northwest, and Serbia is, as you can see in the map, in the north and northwest of Kosovo in the Balkan area. Here is a well-known photo. It's known for all of our memories, especially for us that we have certain age, I have to say. It was March of 1989, removal of autonomy of Kosovo. In 1989, Kosovo was an autonomous province with the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, with a majority Albanian population, around 95%. However, the rise of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia politics led to the revocation of this autonomy already on March 1989. Milosevic's policies aimed to centralize control and suppress Albanian political influence, leading to widespread dismissal of ethnic Albanian from public institutions and several restrictions on political and civil rights. Here I have a photo of Kosovo women in 19th when they fight for freedom, documented on the film. And there is a photo dedicated to Drenica, special region of Kosovo. And as you may see in the photo here, they are a group of women who, for the first time, they took the bread in their hand and they demonstrated in order to show that Drenica, which was area impacted a lot from a war and atrocity, in order to support them with the bread, because being under a constant attack, this area, people there suffered also for the bread. So allowed me to give some political and social repression from 1989, from a time when our autonomy was suppressed, till 1995. Following the removal of autonomy, Kosovo experienced intense institutional discrimination. Ethnic Albanians faced restriction in education, employment, and cultural expression. Massive persecution and detention were applied to those Albanians who fight for their rights. After mass demonstration of Albanians against Milosevic's repression, Serbian government that time closed all institutions as well as education system. In 1999, the exile government, the government which was supported mainly from Kosovo's diaspora, established parallel institutions, including also schooling system as well as healthcare system, to maintain their community social fabric despite the repression from Serbia in that period of time. In that period of time, I have to say that Yugoslavia was still closed, so international attention from human rights mechanism as well as from UN was minimum, or they were not present at all in order to document what's happened in Kosovo. Here I brought it a photo of the time when myself and my generation were following their studies and their high school in a private system, parallel system, private, which was completely illegal system and not accepted from Serbia in that time. Where I have been at that time, myself and my generation. So high school and university were forcibly closed since 1991. Classes were held in a private home. As you can see here in this photo, you could see how the students were sitting in the carpet. Some of those who were able to sit in some kind of mobilized chair, they were quite lucky, but most of us was sitting in the flat. And then the University of Pristina continued to operate undergrounded with the lecture and student to maintain academic activities. But in that time, being student of medical faculty in the third year, I decided to continue my education in Albania. With Albania and Yugoslavia in that time, Serbia didn't have it bilateral cooperation. So all of my trip organized and continue my education had to be done in illegality. Here I brought it a photo from a 1998 time, when Milosevic regime installed a violent governmental system in Kosovo, persecuting every individual who opposed its government. Massive detention investigation began against those who demanded to return the autonomy which was supreme in 1989, or job position, or anybody who had it to fight for the human rights and freedom. This situation led to severe conditions where people were dismissed from their job, and many young people left Kosovo due to repressive economical and political situation in that period of time. Here, just for the whole audience, I wanted to bring the map of Yugoslavia, the entity of Yugoslavia. And after the wartime, we had it, as you may see, different young new countries. Slovenia was the first country declared their independence. Fortunately, the war there or conflict was only 3 days with no losses. Then we have Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia who entered into war. And also, Bosnia and Herzegovina was the main republic of ex-Yugoslavia who had it a lot of loss, human loss, rape, torture. And just recently, we are so glad to hear that United Nations declared Srebrenica and recognized the genocide in Srebrenica, while we have also North Macedonia and Montenegro. Fortunately, they were divided and they created a new country without no major conflict. We have also the map of Kosovo, if you could see it here, just a small one, which I will explain later on, the breakup of Yugoslavia and impact on Kosovo population. I just brought it a photo, a very special photo of which remind us a lot of pain and suffering. It was massacre of Rečak in January 1999, where 45 civilian victims were killed, innocent people. I brought it this photo because in that time, Serbian forces engaged in widespread massacres and ethnic cleansing, creating a humanitarian crisis with thousands of refugees and internally displaced persons. In that time, fortunately, we had it first group of international mechanism who observed Kosovo situation. And here I would like to pay a great honor to a very special person for Kosovo, Ambassador William Walker, who led the US ambassador of OSCE, who for the first time publicly declared this massacre as an atrocity and crime against humanity. After he declared publicly the statement, he was declared as a non-grata person for Kosovo from Milosevic regime. But right now we are so glad, even in his old age, today he joined our Liberation Day and he is with us. And Kosovo population is grateful forever for his support in those kind of dark time when nobody knows what's happened inside the Kosovo. As a result of those massacres, unprotected civilians and other massacres committed towards civilian population led to the NATO humanitarian intervention on March 1999. Here is Gilani, it's my hometown. As you may see, there are different flags and there are different gratitudes to certain nations who contributed to the NATO with a specific focus to the Americans. The aftermath of the war in Kosovo. This photo was known during the wartime, but also after the wartime. A lot of people thought that this woman died somewhere, but fortunately, as you may see, the first woman in the photo in a column of people who was living from Kosovo from pressure, killing, an atrocity. She's alive and she have a girl baby, and this girl baby now is a student. So in a 2 million Kosovars, we went out of this war with a lot of human losses. As you can see, more than 30,000 people were lost. We are still facing a lot of missing people. Around 1,044 people are missing. In this group, we have also still some children who are missing. We have around 1 million people who were Albanians who were displaced in the neighbor countries. And above all, we have around 20,000 victims of rape, which was a crime that was quite challenging to be dealt in Kosovo society due to the stigma and taboos towards this crime. Here I brought it Kosovo again, Kosovo map, and as you may see, the Caucasus is circled with red. It was a wartime when I started my work with the Kosovo refugees. Of course, in that time, I was a medical doctor, completely in another field, working in gastroenterology, finishing my specialization, but hearing a lot of stories, facing a lot of people who lost their children or parents who lost their children, children without parents, people without their limbs, with disabilities. It made me to reflect that beyond my medical background and providing medical help to those people, I have also to reflect on their needs. And for me, it was a turning point, the experience working in the Caucasus while I was working with children in that period of time, but also with mother and adults later on, when I met for the first time rape survivors. As a medical doctor, of course, you have some kind of experience on rape as a concept and consequence, but being raped in the war circumstances with the presence of your family members, they are humiliated, being exposed to the strangers and neighbors, I think rape as a weapon of the tool is still applicable everywhere, and it is the most dirty weapon worldwide, which is so easily to be implicated as a part of strategy of the war, and who led a long-standing consequences, not only to those who faced this kind of torture and humiliation, but also to the generation who came later on. Working with the Kosovo refugees in different camps of Albania, hearing those kind of shivering stories, terrifying stories, facing what's happened with them, but especially rape survivors, it was so important to establish an organization in Kosovo which will create a safe space for those torture victims with specific focus to the rape survivors, with the idea to provide them rehabilitation, space to express freely their suffering, but as well as to work later on with the government. So we established in already 1999 a Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims as a non-governmental organization. And right now the organization is composed from 5 pillars. So we are working through providing direct holistic care to conflict-related sexual violence, but also to other groups. We are working a lot with institutions in terms of advocating for legislative change, but as well as supporting to build policies and protocols. We are so much involved on the research, either clinical research or human rights research. We work on documentation as well as in transitional justice. So I would not like to stop here because there is a lot to be shared, but those who are interested to have more information, they could search in the website of KICD. Pattern of conflict and atrocity related to sexual violence. As I said earlier, you know, as a medical doctor facing women who were raped, of course, it impacted my life and it broken my heart. And of course, from 25 years and now I am working with this group. But seeing how those women use as a military tactic without being protected, it was quite painful to witness such stories. Then the conflict-related sexual violence was used also to terrorize civilian people because mainly they were people, unprotected people. Then targeted specific politic ethnic group, and in this case, mainly Albanian population. This kind of tactic of the war also was used for ethnic cleansing. How it was used for ethnic cleansing, if you want to know. For example, in some villages of Drenica in Chires, it's a village, small village, they selected young children, mainly girls. They raped them in one room while they kept closed family members in order to hear all that kind of terrifying experience that was happening with the children and enabling them to support and to protect the children. While they was raping those children, innocent children, and playing with their body, innocent body, they recorded the voice, and then they show those voice to other villages and used as an ethnic cleansing, so threatening the community. So if you do not move immediately from your homes, look what will happen to your children and to your family. Then rape, it was used also as a method of interrogation, torture, and punishment. In order, for example, especially in this case, I have to mention family of guerrillas groups of Uchakapa, military unit, Kosovo Liberation Army. So they enter in those families, they terrified the raped women and girls and asking them to take information, what's happened, where are your family members, in which area they are fighting. And this last one, it was taking advantage of coercive or lawless environment because there was no any kind of mechanism in place to support them. As an organization working with survivors of sexual violence, we always refer to certain international data in terms of 20,000 survivors. And usually this data came from CDC studies, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International studies. But of course, for us working in this field, it was so important to establish our database and to document all of those crimes in order to amplify the voice of the survivors, to change laws and policies, as well as to work with academia and research and to work on prevention. So we established a database composed from 86 statements when we are able to document the case from a beginning when they were raped, presence of family members, presence of the children, from which uniforms they were raped. And right now, from 1,020 cases, we have around 94 women. So as we could see from this sample, there are mainly women targeted. From those women, those who shared with us the story, there were 45 cases who become pregnant due to the rape, while only 9 of those children are alive. From this amount of number of 1,000, we have 16% children under age of 80, while we have also 60% men and boys. And usually those men and boys for case, they were from, we thought that majority of them, they were from prison or detention, but no, they were raped also in their families in the presence of family members, while we have around 4 ethnic minorities presented in our organization. Here, I just wanted to share with you quotes of one of the survivors. And I would like, as it said here, we were in the group. They would take you, grab your arm, and put you in the house. I was locked in the room without any window for 22 days. You could hear other women screaming from other rooms. It was terrible. It would have been easier to die. The militaries would come in the evening and leave in the morning. To this day, I remember the uniform, the nationalist song, and while they were singing, they sharpened the knives. I have to say that majority of women who are coming in our organization, they ask the perpetrators to kill them. But most of them, they responded to them, if you are alive, you will remember better. And this is exactly related with intergenerational trauma. As a post-war consequence of rape, here also I have a quote. A woman said, I'm afraid I'm pregnant. If it is true that I'm pregnant, it's rather die. It's better to die than to live. So some of the consequences we recognize during our work are psychosocial and physical consequences, unwanted pregnancies, socioeconomic consequences, stigmatization, shame, intergenerational trauma, legacy, legal and justice challenges or issues. Here I brought it impact on physical, psychological, social, economical, legal, and intergenerational trauma. In terms of physical, what we see in our daily experience, we find injuries and disabilities and death, some cases. sexual transmitted disease, unwanted pregnancy, and sterility, especially to the men. We saw it also sterilities. Psychological consequences, depression, suicidal thoughts, and also suicidal case. PTSD and trauma, flashbacks, anger, anxiety, and fear. While in social level, we see stigma, blame, rejection, disrupted relation, abandonment from families, breakdown of families and communities. In economy and legal aspect, we see loss of livelihood and role in society, economic dependency, because majority of those women, after being raped and tortured, life after this event was so hard for them to continue normal life or career. They were unable to have further education or be employed, and therefore they become so dependent on family members. Another part it is still challenging, I think, is lack of justice of survivors and reparation, which start quite late. Intergenerational trauma, perhaps I will speak in the second part, and I would not lose the time in this.
Already too late, yes.
Yes. The roots of reparation and advocacy effort, maybe just for your information, in 2040, 15 years after the war, we were able to have a law that granted legal recognition to survivors of sexual violence during the war in Kosovo. So 15 years, all of the burden working with this pain in society, it was in an NGO shoulder, because due to the stigma, taboos, or lack of support and space for this group, but finally in 2040, they were recognized. In 2070, already we have a foundation of the Government Commission for recognizing and verifying the status of person raped during the liberation of war in Kosovo. And a monthly pension of 230 euros was dedicated as a compensation of recognizing the suffering. From that time, Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare already authorized 4 non-governmental organizations to support the application process. As it is KICT, my organization, Medica Jakova, Medica Kosova, and Center for Promotion of Women's Rights from Trenas. Another measurement which was taken from government is 40th of April, was recognized as a Memorial Day of conflict-related sexual violence. Pain in our society came in different shape. While veterans, invalids, civilian victims, missing people, they had their days and their name and surname. While conflict-related sexual violence was the most invisible group, and space for them, it was quite limited, but we are glad that after 25 years, there are some progress in this field. In terms of justice, I have to say that Kosovo was run from UN administration or UN body till 2007. Unfortunately, none of the case in this body received any justice or even any kind of feedback from those who already shared their testimonies. Also, absence with legal cooperation between Serbia and Kosovo, it's challenging survivors to reach justice. But also with EU mission, EU legs, when we had it later on, a new administration of war crime, unfortunately, none of those cases already shared the stories that were able to receive justice. While last year, we have first historical case, Zoran Vukotic case, who took 13 years sentence, and the case is confirmed from a Supreme Court. And I have to say that this woman with whom we work quite a lot in our organization, she already shared her story and asked for justice in UNMIC time, in EULEX time. And what is the paradox, even her file was dismissed when our court was asking to find some kind of data from either UNMIC or EULEX. None of those data were present, neither in UN bodies, neither in EULEX. This lady was mother of twins during that time. When she was raped, she lost both of those twins. She filed the case already in early phase after the war, then in EULEX. And later on, we had to support her because when she came in our organization, she was completely broken case. We didn't thought that she would be able to sum up herself and go again in the court. But through having close cooperation with State Prosecutor Office, working with her family, we have some hopes, and not only us, but whole Kosovo, and especially survivors group and the family, that justice can be made, but we have really to be persistent in our approach. Here, there are some kind of campaigns that we organized in Kosovo, and I just wanted to bring the photo, maybe just to comment the photo of Stadium of Pristina, football stadium. Here there are anemones, so this kind of flower, as you see, is a symbol of the survivors during a lockdown time. Because survivors were impacted a lot from COVID pandemic, we tried to bring in creative way the voice of survivors in stadium in a football match between Kosovo and Moldova, but also expressing that survivors are present with us, but we do not see. And here, each of these seats with a logo of anemone express the fate of the survivors. In this photo, I would like to share two brave women, two survivors who for the first time break the ice and they share their stories publicly. It is Vasilija Krasniqi-Godman, which she was in a young age when she was raped, a child. And for the first time in 2018, she shared her story publicly when she reached to create a lot of support, and our society knows her as a heroine, and now she is becoming a worldwide advocate. She's a special envoy for conflict-related sexual violence from our president. While in another figure, you have Shurete Tahiri in the frame, which also later, one year later, she shared her story with the state prosecutor office in order to support other survivors to seek justice. And Shurete now is a member of the board of Survivors Engagement Board in International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims. So we are so honored and humbled with their kind and with their stories.
Feride, may I interrupt to make a point for everyone? The library of the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma contains the richest collection in a multidisciplinary collection of works. So please remember to put it in the chat so we add it to the library. And I'm saying this to all of the panelists and to everyone in the audience, please. So forgive me for the interruption, go ahead. But since you're already presenting a book here, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And since there are a lot of also Kosovo psychologists and activists following this webinar, I believe they could have access in this library and use for their proposal.
Perfect, perfect. And
here is one special memorial dedicated to the sacrifice of women during the wartime. As you may see, it's a portrait of one woman. It's in the middle of Pristina. And as a symbol of sacrifice, this kind of portrait of the figure, it's made with 20,000 metallic nails in order to metals in order to express the suffering of 20,000 women and girls who were raped during the wartime. In this place, this avenue became quite an avenue for advocacy, for gathering, for meeting a lot of activists, but as well as from international visitors. And here we declared as a Memorial Day of Survivor of Sexual Violence, 14th of April. 14th of April, it's a day when for the first time Vasilija Krasniqi-Godman went to the place when her rape happened, and from that place she invited our government in 2019, in 14 April of 2019, invited our governments to recognize this day as a special day for Memorial Day for the survivors. And finally, for 2 years, this day is officialized, and we are aiming in this day to gather a lot of activities and as well as to use for our advocacy action in order to amplify the voice of the survivors. So that was my first part. Thank you very much for your...
Thank you. Thank you very much both for the introduction about Kosovo itself and its war history, and for the impact on the survivors. And Ali Riza, Ali Riza, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
I'm eager to hear your contribution. I would like everyone to be cognizant of the time. So there's a time for dialogue and a time for dialogue with the audience as well. So try to keep an eye on the watch, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ali Riza. I'm most eager to hear your voice.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Dear participants, it is my pleasure to be part of this panel and to contribute to this discussion. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for Rava on facilitating eventually or finding the panelists, as Daniel mentioned. So my name is Ali Riza Aranliu. I am at the Department of Psychology at University of Pristina. I work there full-time. Before I would like to start, I really wanted just to mention here and thank Dr. Esha Feride for her work and work of the KRCT on this field. So what I will try to do within these 10 minutes, I will just try to give a very broad perspective on what are perpetuating mechanisms of transgenerational trauma, to provide a context on that, mainly focusing on current political situation and political context that sort of perpetuates transgenerational trauma and lack of reconciliation as an important process that is setting the tone to continue. Then what I will try to do within this 10 minutes, which is already 9 minutes now, try to focus on 3 studies. I will just share very briefly 3 studies on some data regarding meaning making of war across different generations, meaning making of war from the family members of missing persons from Kosovo who are experiencing ambiguous loss. And in the end, I will just bring in some quantitative findings of a recent study done in 2023 on presence of trauma over generations, and how just quantifying that, putting it in a number that this problem is still present in our community. So I think as we speak, I think now there are about 50 conflicts that are going on around the world, in a sense. I think 23 was the highest number of year when we had highest number of refugees worldwide. And what is interesting when you read about the history of these conflicts, most of these conflicts are considered old conflicts in a way that had a history of conflict. And often transgenerational trauma is one of the reasons and one of the causes, besides of complex geopolitics, that eventually perpetuates or reinitiates this kind of conflict. So I think the topic of transgenerational trauma is quite complex and quite important to address, not just from a public mental health perspective, but also from a social political point of view. I think Dr. Feride did excellent introduction of the historical context of the war and the context of the war, so I will skip that part. So coming into the point where I want to first start. So depending on what studies you look at, so there are some meta-analytic studies, the rate of PTSD in our country, even 20 years after the war, usually ranges from 17 to 25% of the populations, which is a quite large number when we look at that. I think one of the things that I think that we have failed during these 25 years is treatment of PTSD. So despite many efforts, despite many trials, as a society and as a public health services, we have not been able to address very well the issue of trauma in an individual, but also on a collective level. And I think when we add to this context the lack of proper reconciliation process, It's not only here. I think in Balkans also in general, which in my opinion has further contributed to the multi-generational trauma manifestation and multi-generational trauma transmission, not just in Kosovo, but I think overall in the Balkans. I think this altogether, in my opinion, has further impacted the maintenance of a nationalistic discourse that is ongoing in the whole region and in the politics. I think this rhetorics that is currently in the Balkans continuing is influencing the behavior and attitudes of both older and younger generations in Kosovo, but also in a region wider. As we live today and as we speak and as we celebrate our freedom, 25 years, we're still hearing sounds, fears, or news about the fear of the war. And I think, to my opinion, this is sort of like reinforcing the hypervigilance, which is one of the main symptoms and core symptoms of psychological trauma. As my time is limited on 10 minutes, I would like to focus on several studies that some of them were done by me and some of them were done by my colleagues at the University of Pristina. First, I would like to share a very brief, interesting findings from a study conducted by Professor Katrina Kelmendi, who explored qualitatively on she did a phenomenological study aiming to explore how lived experiences of war of citizens of Kosovo was perceived from 3 generations of grandparents, parents, and adolescents who never experienced the war or who were born after the war. So they did a semi-structured study with 37 participants. The study was very interesting in a sense that it brought the meaning making of the war across different generations, but also provided a sort of also differences on their view regarding the past, but also regarding how they view the future. For example, let's say the grandparents, when they were interviewed, there's in an article you can find all these findings, but the grandparents had experienced the period of Yugoslavia, the period of so-called advancement of Kosovo during Yugoslavia, but also then the downfall, as Dr. Feride explained, with the Milosevic's arrival. This generation shared multiple experiences of trauma, of losses, but what was very interesting, they were more hopeful about the future, including the reconciliation and including the possibility of reconciliation with the other side. The similar pattern of findings was found also for the parents, except that for parents, I mean, the findings were very similar to the first generation of grandparents, except that the parents were sort of experiencing as being failing in their youth, because most of them, they were in their peak of career during the Milosevic regime. So they feel sort of unfulfilled regarding professionally, family life, and in terms of a potential that they could achieve. Again, important finding, very similar with the first generation of grandparents. They were pretty optimistic about the future and the reconciliation. I think the most interesting findings came from the youth, from the adolescents that were never part of the war, who were mainly born after the war. So basically, they never experienced the war, but the information about the war was passed down from family narratives with varying degrees of detail, but with quite a lot of emotional content. These adolescents feel soreness, pain, sense of responsibility for suffering of their elderly and parents, and actually felt quite a lot of pride from the resistance and resilience of their family members. But what was very interesting for this generation was that they were very proud members of the new country, but they reported higher level of hatred and lack of availability and readiness, essentially to make a contact, and showed higher concerns on future conflict. So I think this study, in a way, what illustrates us, is illustrates sort of the both on how the stories regarding the war were transmitted to this younger generation, but also the impact and the perspective that they're having on future and on the other side, if I may say. Then the second study that I want to share with you, let me just pass on the other side, is a study that we have done with the families of missing persons. It was a quantitative finding. It was a quantitative study that we have conducted with families of missing persons. So just as an information, these families experience ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is one of the most complex processes that an individual can experience. So these people have unfinished commemoration process and burial process, while they may feel on a daily basis the psychological presence of their missing family members. What I want to highlight from this study, which I think was, for me, was at least a very interesting finding, was that the highest predictor of meaning making or of some sort of growth within these family members was being active, or being active in community, especially in community organizations that were advocating in finding missing family members. So I guess what happens in this kind of setting is that they provide support, informal support to one another, and which I find it rather astonishing as a strongest predictor of the meaning making. Then the last study that, the last finding that I would like to share with you, as I said, is the study that a colleague of mine, Professor Zamira, did. This is just to get you an indication of the still presence of high level of PTSD among our population. So she did a study with 121 parents and 116 youth. The rate of PTSD among the youth was 21.5%, whereas among parents was 11.4%. And what was I mean, and then one of the findings that I think was expected in a way was that youth who had parents with PTSD and more traumatic experiences during the war were more prone to post-traumatic stress disorder compared to those who did not have parents with PTSD. Another important finding, I think, which was from this study, I think it relates to the qualitative studies. Youth reported less social support receiving on their traumatic experiences compared to parents, which to me is an indicator that there is a lack of, let's put it, either systemic or non-systemic approach to the issue of trauma in our community. So I think, as a concluding remark, I'm in my 11th minute. So I think in addressing intergenerational trauma, I think is essential for our future. The way how we commemorate, the way how we experience our losses, and the way how we celebrate our freedom, I think is quite important for the future, because the findings are showing that trauma is present there, it's been transmitted. Then we lack any systematic way to address that. I think already Dr. Feride mentioned the importance of reconciliation and justice, and collective recognition is crucial. I think this is setting the tone of continuation of animosity, continuation of fear, and continuation of fear from the conflict even in the future. And I think this is setting the tone even for the forthcoming years. And lastly, but not the least important one, is the role of community engagement and other supportive systems that we need to bring in, as for more vulnerable groups that Dr. Feride mentioned, up to more general population, on how we manifest the war and the experience of war, and how we transmit the experiences and the story of the war. So I think this would be my initial input for this webinar, and I'll be pleased to answer to questions if there will be any of them later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alireza. I see that 10 minutes in this panel turns to 40 to 20, we will. I think you don't like the number 10. So,
Okay.
but so Feride, I'm afraid to give you the floor again now, because you really have to use only 3 minutes. Otherwise, other people simply won't have their own time. So perhaps, what do you think? I wanted, you know that the third presenter is Rabbi Joshi, but because Feride was focusing on the history, we said that she may take 2 minutes, but really not than 2 minutes, to speak about the epigenetic findings of your studies before Rabba speaks about. No, this is I look just at the number of the slides, and that is already 30 minutes. So we need to be more communal here.
Yes.
So how about go directly to the epigenetic findings?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so Rabba can go to the psychosocial findings, because she's using the the Danieli inventory of multi-generational legacies of trauma. I would want to make some comments, including about Aliriza's presentation, that if you only talk about PTSD, you will never have the findings on psychosocial, really. This is what the Danieli inventory is for. Okay, there is no relationship between PTSD and the totality of life experience. And this is what the Danieli inventory is for. And but I do want to and we can have a whole webinar or 2 or 3 about that, but let's cover the epigenetic dimensions, so then we can go to the psychosocial as well. 3 minutes maximum. Go ahead.
I will try for 3 minutes. Hopefully I can make it. Otherwise, I have also a slide with the article. So those who would like to work.
Exactly. Put
Yes,
all of
they could
them
go,
in chat.
they could go through the article. First of all, I would like just to mention that after 20 years, a lot of survivors in our daily session, they reflect that they are not good parenting towards their children. They are unable to offer proper love and care to their children in our daily session. While they reflected that they see a similar symptom to their children. All those information collected in the session made us to realize that we have to have a methodological, very scientific oriented methodological study, which we decided to go with epigenetic study, a first study worldwide made with this group, while there were study on with the Jewish population, with the genocide of Rwanda and some other groups. So there were 120 women who participate and 120 children who participate. I just wanted to bring, pardon me, I wanted to bring 4 categories of children. Children who are impacted directly from conflict-related sexual violence, as it is Vasya, because she was only 16 years when she was raped. Children who were present during the rape of their parents, as it is Shureta here, and she was raped in the presence of 2 daughters, 1 year and 3 years. Children who born as a product of rape, and as you may heard earlier, in our database, we have 45 women who were pregnant, only 9 children are alive, so those children finished on early abortion or in different forms. And we have children who are affected from parents who were exposed to sexual torture, and here we have intergenerational trauma. So in this study, we had two markers. We measured cortisol level as a response hormone on stress, as well as epigenetic change to the children and mothers. To realize the study, we had it on board Monash University and Dignity Institute for Torture Rehabilitation Prevention and University of Copenhagen. We identified that 30% of children express abnormal cortisol level with those born with mother who had PTSD during pregnancy time. What's mean that mother, during the pregnancy, they were able to transfer trauma to their children more than mother who didn't have it PTSD during the pregnancy time. Then we saw it also epigenetic change in and out also to the children who were affected from a mother during pregnancy with PTSD. Here is the study. If somebody would like to read it more, please, I encourage you. You have an epigenomic journal. You could see whole study as it is. And since I have 3 minutes, I'm trying really to bring my best. Then having those outcomes helped us in organization to move from individual treatment to the family, also considering concept of family intervention, but with a specific focus to the children. So in order to reach that kind of intervention, we had to introduce family systematic approach in order to support children and family with support and clinical with the 10 session, and both families, mother and children, were part of epigenetic research and cortisol level. We reached to see in the end, and we are in the stage to publish a second articles to show that family systematic therapy had it positive impact to the children and the family. I think Aliriza already shared a lot of benefit of working with transgeneration trauma, but of course, early detection, prevention, transmission of trauma is so important to work on intergeneration trauma, improving mental health of those children, enhancing parent skills, because as I said, majority of mothers had this guilty syndrome that they are unable to be good parent and to provide care and adequate love to their children. It is also so important to build resilient children and to understand those kind and identify those triggers and those behavior in order to be able to cope better and to be able to have better learning possibility, adaptation, and psychosocial consequence they express. More than that, I think it is to promote also healthy relation in the family, because sometimes those children and those mothers, they don't know what are the healthy families. So using family systematic approach to those children and mothers, we support it to understand healthy relationship and how to build those healthy relationships. More above all, I think what is so important is to break the negative patterns and also to promote a youth generation who is able to build this nation. And the idea of this study was to give a light also to this very hiding group, because nobody thought about that. We are still discussing about primary victim, for those who were present, for those who born, but for those who coming later on, who were not at all present during the wartime, it was still undiscussed topic. And for us, it was so important, not only for Kosovo, but for worldwide, to bring some light and care to the children who are impacted from those mothers who are raped. Here are just 2 photos of our activity with children, and I am done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rabah, please, the floor is yours. And if you can, okay, good.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Rabah. That was a real race.
Yes.
You have to unmute, Rabah.
So yeah, thank you very much to all of you, Dr. Daniele for organizing the webinar, Dr. Rushiti for bringing forward the historical context so that my presentation can have a better understanding, and also Dr. Iron Liu for bringing forward the importance of the social aspects, and also laying out the different studies that have been conducted in Kosovo. I would like to start this presentation just by saying that my curiosity for this topic came as I was working with different groups of young people, and I was witnessing different changes that are not really psychopathology per se, but I could see some kind of differences. And first time that I encountered the terminology about transgenerational trauma transmission was something that gave meaning to what I was witnessing in reality here. So in 2014, when I had the opportunity to get in touch with the outside world and academics, I had the chance to meet Dr. Daniele and get to know about her instrument. So I was really eager to have the opportunity to apply that study in Kosovo and just kind of give meaning to everything that I was witnessing as a professional here. So in 2008, I finally started to do the research. I started to collect data between May and August 2018. I managed to get on board 150 young people, offsprings of Albanian victims from the Kosovo War, 63 women, 40 men, and 2 of them didn't declare the gender. All of them were born between 96 and 2001. I was trying to reach out to the second generation, which was quite young at that time. So I had to include the participants that were born up 2 years before the war, during the war, and 2 years after the war. So those would have no conscious memory of the atrocities that their families would have experienced. In terms of how the mapping of the participants, I managed to recruit 67 participants with 1 victim in the family, 17 with 2 victims, 6 with 3, 12 with 4 to 9 victims within their families, undeclared 3, and this made up the total of 105. As you can see in the other table, you would see that the connection with the victims is within the kind of close family members, starting from the parents, brother, sister, extending to the maternal and paternal grandfather and mother, then uncles and aunts, and so basically those family connections that would have made an impact in the parents, so that the parents could pass on the trauma to their children. The methodology that I used, as I said, is the Daniele inventory that was brought by the moderator here, which is kind of, I have to say, quite weird to present her work, but it's quite an amazing tool, and it measures the, like as Aliriza was presenting and Daniele herself was saying earlier, a different approach to trying to make sense of that trauma that lives within the society. So it measures how the parents adopted their styles of parenthood, and their styles impacted their children. So the inventory measured the victim style, which is measuring the level of how people were stuck in the loss of and the trauma rupture, the numb style, the emotional isolation and detachment, and the fighter style, the valuing of mastery and justice, as Feride mentioned, and Aliriza also as a crucial points for the victims to be able to move on. And then that was measured against the reparative impacts of the survivors' children, which in a way represent the unconscious motivation of the children to repair or heal the trauma of their parents. And that also was divided in 6 specific reparative impacts, which include insecurity about one's competence, reparative protectiveness, need for power or control, obsession with the war, defensive psychosocial, and immature dependency. One important element in bringing those connections is the generational linkage on how parents, like how children relate to the stories and identity of their grandparents in order to make that connection in their identity and be able to pass on the trauma. And also something that we heard quite a lot from Feride's presentation on the conspiracy of silence, on the fact that the society in a way behaves with indifference or avoidance and denies the traumatic experience in order to be able to survive or be able to cope with that vulnerable part of itself. And on the other hand, like what is helping all this transmission of the trauma is trauma mediators, which is coming in a form of patriarchal values, like social or group superego, folklore, religion, and myth. So those serving as mediators to pass on those emotions collectively or in a family setting to the children. So what the study found out, as Dr. Daniele mentioned earlier, we could not establish a direct connection with the trauma, direct trauma of the parents, which would have been those that were declared here, like beating and all of those that are measured by PTSD. So this is a form that was part of the inventory adopted from the Harvard trauma inventory. So there was no connection between the actual symptoms or the actual sufferings of the parents with the children's impacts. And this is because the study in itself did not try to measure the level of traumatic response or symptomatology, but on the other hand, it tried to measure the way how the parents behaved with their children and in the social setting. Also, this is something that when I did the analysis of whether like separately between like for the mother's traumatic experiences and father's traumatic experiences, there was an interesting correlation, although there was no direct relationship established or effect established. There was a relationship between mother's traumatic experiences with the children's reparative adaptational impacts, and that might have been also because the participants that were recruited here were not having their fathers. They're like like relatively high number of them lost their fathers in the war, so that they could not have that relationship. So this is something that was not able to be established, and hence the distinction between this correlation, like this difference in correlation between mothers and fathers' traumatic experiences, which also is contradicting the findings of another study that was done previously in Kosovo, finding the link between fathers' post-traumatic stress symptoms. The study was run with the children of the veterans, so that might have been the difference between those two studies. On the other hand, the study quite well confirms previous studies that were done by using the Daniele inventory with the second generation of the Holocaust and other second generations of the offsprings of the victims using Daniel inventory. So there was a strong correlation of parents' adaptational styles with children's reparative adaptational impacts. In the separate analysis between mothers and fathers' adaptational styles, mothers' victim styles have the strongest effect.
Rabba, the phrase is adaptational style.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for my spelling.
Okay. No, people make that mistake, but so I correct it. That's all. Go ahead.
It's okay. Also, there's a strong correlation with the father's and mother's numb style, so that emotional isolation playing a role here. But there was no correlation or no effect established with the father's and mother's fighter style, which is this fighting for the justice, and that kind of breaks down the trauma rupture to be reflected in the children. What the study found and what other researchers using this methodology established is that they qualified both the victim styles and numb styles to be the strongest predictors of the future psychopathology. And since this effect has already been established in this study, this shows the quite the prevalence to having those symptoms within the society here. Another aspect that was measured by the study is the impact of conspiracy of the silence on parents' adaptational styles and children's adaptational impacts. And those both were kind of confirmed. You could see that positive association with mothers and fathers' numb style had a negative association with the parents' fighting style because of that active participation of the parents to break down the silence. So you could see the logic. So those parents who had a fighter style were not correlated with the conspiracy of, or were negatively correlated with the conspiracy of silence because their activism already is breaking that. But on the other hand, there was a correlation with the children's specific factors, like the one for the need for power or control, and the obsession with the war, which is somehow completing that logic of the conspiracy of the silence. As Feride was saying earlier, this is in line with her input in confirming that in Kosovo there's already still a high degree of conspiracy of silence, especially with certain groups of victims, and that is mostly with the victims of sexual violence, but also with other groups of the victims. And this also was confirmed by the strong resistance of the families to have their children be recruited in the study, because they didn't want their family stories to reach out to their children. So they were quite protective of the war losses to be passed on to the children or have them being exposed to those stories. So even though they were above the age of 18, families refused to have their children participate in a study that was related to a loss of a family member. Another part that the study measured is the effect of the generational linkage as a mediary factor in passing on the trauma. And the study confirmed that among the participants, there was a high intensity of generational linkage. So although Kosovo has gone through these societal changes in the way how the families are living and adopting a more Western culture of living with more nuclear family made of just with children and parents, still the generational linkage was quite high. And also it resulted in a negative correlation with fathers' fighter style, which is also somehow going on along the lines that the identity of the family is passed on through the father's line, that patriarchal identity in the society. And finally, I would just like to highlight the limitation of this study, which, to my knowledge, surrounds the young age of the participants who might not have been culturally familiar to understand the different notions of the questionnaire, and also the lack of full acknowledgement of the family histories, because as I said before, families were trying to keep their children isolated from the stories that happened to the family in order to prevent the passing of the trauma to them. And the future recommendations for anyone wishing to replicate the study would be that do that like after a few years, when the second generation would have reached a certain age to be able to avoid the limitation of the studies, but also to have a control group of children that were not having immediate family members as a victim of war, so that they are able to see how the trauma affected, or whether it affected differently those with the family victims or those who in a different form experienced a different kind of social trauma, be that or something that is not counted only as a human loss, but might have been like the refugee status or something like that. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Rabba. Thank you for rushing.
I try to.
And it's very clear that we have to plan at least a whole day or a weekend conference on this. We can't do justice to the complexity of what we are trying to illuminate even in 2 hours. You know, normally we do an hour and a half. Now it's 2 hours. We still cannot. We really need time. And we need time to think through all the concepts we use and how they apply to what we want to really explore. What's the relationship between PTSD and justice? Is there a relationship? What's the relationship between epigenetics and social change? And what what the concepts do, and what dimensions do we have to explore in order to answer what really troubles us, what really concerns us. So we should get together, even for a methodological meeting. As I mentioned to some of you already, to me, ideally, we have to study all of them, but then to study the relationship among the findings. So we really see what leads to what. For those of you who would like a further exposure to the Danieli inventory findings, one of the webinars among our 50 webinars on the website is my own presentation, both in English and in French, of our findings. And we also found differences among those children of survivors who were raised in the diaspora and those who were raised in the homeland, which again is so important to all of the populations we are studying. But we have to rush. Jetta and Arion, you're young. Rush. Go ahead, Jetta. Run.
Hi. Thank you. I am really trying.
I know.
Okay. Hello, everyone. And thank you to all of you, to my the speakers before me. I will try to wrap it up maybe a bit quicker than 10 minutes, if it's okay with you all. I don't have that many slides or a lot of materials to work with, but I've selected a few quotes from some of the oral history interviews we did with the younger generation. I would like to focus more on what has not been said, actually. So completely skipping the traumatic part and just moving on to what is the idea of independence, into empowerment, into liberation, and to that, just dwelling into the emotions like euphoria and anxieties for the future. I've selected a few quotes from some of the interviews we've done a few years ago. This was a collaboration between Pristina Insight and Oral History Kosovo. These are some quotes from Fatim Krezi, for instance. He was a student at that time. So he says, until the day of the independence, when it was declared, I had no indicator that I could know that the declaration of independence was happening. At the time, I was at a young age. I couldn't understand as it would have understood it now. So it was very noisy and it was celebrating. This happened in Prizren. I didn't have any strong emotions about this because he didn't know what independence meant. And this was just the idea of having the need to celebrate it came also as a legacy from his family, just knowing that he should be happy about it. This is Petr Bejdoni. He says that the familiar feeling when he had that NATO intervened, it is over now. Will it get better tomorrow? What is happening? These historical moments that took place at that time would always make you recall war memories and the sufferings we went through. As a little child, not fully aware, but with a perception of my own about the war, and they bring back these memories, so you don't know whether to be happy, sad, if it would be better tomorrow when we wake up in the morning. Will it happen after its signing? But being accessible and being active. This is Abdul Ghashi. He used to be an educator during the 90s. He was one of the professors who taught in the schoolhouses. Maybe because it's because of the nature of what life made us, his generation, what we always look at things that with a dose of criticism, let's call them improvisations, but that didn't leave us with good impressions. To me, the ugliest thing about it is that we always try to explain things by putting ourselves at their center, not as part of the process or as participants in the process, but as their pivot. I have to say that people are pretty disappointed and desperate, not because I don't think this is a great achievement, the independence itself, but because the expectations for ourselves were greater, to work with more commitment, more honesty, more consciousness, and above all, based on rules and laws and not egos and personal gains. Shivdona Ademi is also used to be a student at that time. In our family, the Independence Declaration was it was silence. Shivdona comes from the Skenderai region. Maybe the case that happened in our family, my mother's brother was killed. She felt sad and we were all silent. Maybe my father mostly went out because he could see my mother sad like that. And so she always hid the story. So mostly Independence Day was spent in silence, and a lot of people called to congratulate, but the Declaration of Independence made us feel more hurt than happy. These are just a few of the stories that we spoke with the younger generation, and it's very important to note that all of the stories come with the questions was always asked, where were you situated during the independence? So it would naturally come up from the interviewees that they would speak about the idea of independence and what it meant to them. To most of them, it spoke to this euphoric sense that independence was something that should happen, that was meant to happen, but in that sense didn't have didn't have a date that would say it would be better by this date, or things would turn out okay, or that life itself would happen in a more easy and in a more normal sense. So oral histories provide a profound insight, presenting this unique point on perspectives on both the influential and vulnerable. This approach really embraces the nuances of contradictions, uncertainties, mistakes, so it can show us the anxieties, fears, aspirations, and dreams. This could definitely, connecting to what the four speakers said, that the oral histories really also help in creating and narrating, and also helping us see the intimate family experiences and the connection to the broader national context. So for us, it takes maybe 2 hours or 3 hours of an interview to really get to the point where we can hold the puzzle together and see the context of, depending on the generations that we're also researching, it connects to specific points in history, either through the movements of liberations, of protests that we're researching, but also to small and specific events that lead to a greater cause. For me, this was very important, especially what Vatlion said, because the idea of not having an emotion for especially a generation of the late 90s or the early 2000s, the Gen Z millennia, it's about really not understanding what is there to celebrate when life should be life should be celebrated in the first place as it is. If for our speakers here and our participants as well, if you go to the platform, you can see a range of interviews from different ages, different backgrounds, and different experiences that we talk about. And at the end, we also try to see, we ask maybe a vague and general question in the beginning, but at one point it comes down to this conclusion that our speakers talk about, and it always at some point it concludes the war, and it concludes the idea of liberation and the idea of empowerment. But to us, especially me personally, it's something I would like also to research through my dissertation, which I will start in October. It's really in capturing the stories and the emotions of what it takes to build a state, of whether it is convenient and whether it was risky enough and dangerous enough, and also was it worth it enough to have the sacrifices and what it meant to the generations that really worked with it. I come from the sociology department, so I also look at space, and I look at also the broad context on what is kind of an emotion, what is anxiety, what is a liberation. And some pictures I've put in here are some of the monuments that are in Pristina. So the newborn monument, it was put there during in the independence. So in 2018, it's a private owned monument, and it's right there at Borarames, where the own monument has its own history. But now we have a new monument that is kind of encapsulating and being pushed down and just sort of showcasing a new history in the making. The newborn itself, it changes the colors, and the owner of the monument, really, he plays with the colors and plays with the meaning each year, so it can have a different thematic sense to the state. A Let Go EU monument was put there during the Europe Day in 2016, I believe it was. So it was supposed to commemorate Kosovo not being part of the EU and not being able to move without visa, which is a different thing for now. But still, this just came as a sort of a crisis, or just a pinpoint on how to approach the identity, which is, we go out from the war and we think immediately on joining the EU without having to see the consequences and without having to see what is there to knit together, which means all the stories that we have collected, all of the stories that the former speakers and researchers have talked about, the intergenerational trauma, which has not been spoken about in public, and it just shows up in space. The Herina memo, it was unveiled in June 12, 2015. So it's, as Dr. Feride said, I have nothing more to add, but to me it's important to see that the way that we commemorate women in public spaces, especially if connected to the historical moments such as war. Sometimes it's either women who have been raped, who are being pushed and who are being seen as heroes, but actually they are women who have suffered violence. So the hero is really is put on their name without them having to be the first ones or the women who say so for themselves. So they have to carry the baggage of being a hero in a public space, but also having to be the people who have to deal with the trauma of their own and have to unravel that trauma with their own selves, with their own communities, with their own families, and just knowing how to convey it and to really put it to a point where their traumatic experience can be not just educational to us as a younger generation, but also to international audiences as you are. And the memorial itself has a good point, has a good point on being there, but it's also, I feel that it should be also talked about the burden of carrying the hero and the victim at the same time, and the critique that it should have in the first place. So if you're not a hero, you can also be you're either Mother Teresa. So it's very it's interesting to see that spaces are commemorated either through the point of sacrifice, which is here, or a sacrifice that was not chosen from women, such as the case with Heroina. This is another memorial that was put in 2015. It is dedicated to 1,650 people missing from the Kosovo War, and is standing right in front of the parliament. The monument itself is quite small. It doesn't have the visibility it needs, but people often stay in front of it and try to look at it, but it's quite mostly hidden between bushes, and it feels as aesthetically doesn't have the biggest impact. So, and the other three points is having to have strong men leaders who are the sort of state builders and father figures and of the state. And if it's not, you know, if you're not a woman who is suffering and being victimized, then you're either a very strong man, of course, militarized, and being put in the public space. So which leads me to the interviews that we did with different generations, such as Abel Goja, that says, you know, we thought about the work that was done in the 90s was done about having this integrity and this autonomy that was not present during the 90s, and that same to be portrayed and to be showcased in the 2000s or after the war. Which brings us to the younger generation who say, we don't know really how to deconstruct the historical moments and how to see them in our day-to-day life. That's why also kind of looking at the public spaces, to me personally, it was important, and it always is, to go back to it. And this is just in the center of Pristina. We have memorials all over Kosovo, and it's something that should be put up front, not just for researchers, but also for day-to-day citizens and communities who use the public space. Sorry, I will stop sharing now. I think I'm 2 minutes earlier. I try to be quite fast. Hopefully I've mentioned important notes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jetta, and thank you very much for adding also, I mean, Feride did too before, but adding more systematically the public dimension, both the interpersonal and public dimension to our multi-dimensional discussion. Arian, can you really keep to 10 minutes? That will be a miracle. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
have
will.
at least 4 minutes for the questions from the audience. Go ahead.
I will try to finish
You
even
are,
in 5.
you are the youngest. Go ahead.
I will try to do it even faster than 10. So the part that I will share, it will be more personal experiences and personal perspective of transgenerational trauma in Kosovo and inherited trauma. So I was born during 1999, during the war in Kosovo, so I don't really remember the war, but I was also affected by it when I lost family member, including my father during the war. But even though I didn't maybe live through the trauma of the war, I grew up with all of the trauma that was passed by me, by my family, by the community around me, by kind of installing this fear and this anger in me towards the other community or this experience that they went during the war. So this fear, for example, extended to the part where I was afraid of a language that I never heard and of a flag that I only maybe saw it in TV. And so this, especially these two symbols, became a very, very big part of or source of anxiety and anger in me as a young person. And then this also led to the difference in relationships with young people around me, which led to a lot of anger, a lot of, when a lot of young people were getting into fights as a way to kind of vent all of this built up anger that was created by this inherited trauma by their families and communities, and also this isolation between communities when you didn't really want to speak or were also scared to speak to the other communities that weren't belonging to your own. Because of this, for example, my first encounter that I had with Serbian community, as I belong to the Albanian community in Kosovo, was when I was 20, so in 2019, and 19 years after the war ended in Kosovo. And it was the first time that I also met Serbian community, but the first time that I traveled to a region with a Serbian majority, which was in north of Kosovo, where the whole city was filled with Serbian flag and you could only hear Serbian speaking around you. So all of these assumptions, anger, fear that I had against that community kind of duplicated. But that was only until I met young people from that community. And I started realizing that, okay, they are having the same feelings as I have towards them. So they were also being scared to meet me. They had anger and anxiety to meet me, which led to this realization that I had that, okay, all of this is coming not because I went through it, but because of my family went through it, and it was passed to me. All of this was passed to me. And it was this point when kind of realized that, okay, if I want to do a difference with me, it is this point where I have to stop kind of this inherited trauma, this cycle of inherited trauma with me. And so this is the reason why I moved towards peace building and reconciliation work in Kosovo, where I have a small organization with a friend of mine from the north of Kosovo, Serbian community, where we organize activities where young people from Albanian and Serbian community meet and kind of go through the same process as I went through at that point. And for a lot of these young people, they have also the same fears, the same anxiety, the same anger that I went through. And we kind of try to facilitate this first contact that they have with each other, because for 90% of them, it's the first time that they are meeting people from the other community. But usually from our experience, from my experience, these fears and this assumption that they have for each other don't really survive after the first contact, because immediately you see this relationship starting to being built, even if they don't speak the same language. They try to do it by finding common words that they have, by sharing music, sharing food, similarities in the culture. And it is a really powerful connection that happens, and a really beautiful connection to see happening at the same time. And our role as activists in peace building and reconciliation is to try and not to be as therapists for these young people, as we are not therapists. We are just young activists, and we also we do say that we do it in, what we do is a non-formal education, so there is nothing formal about it. We try to just be close to them, to facilitate this meeting, to navigate with them together through these fears, through these assumptions, to create this safe space where they can share these stories, where also they can challenge themselves and kind of open their minds towards new experiences. One interesting perspective that I have seen happening during this time, it is based on what's happening in Kosovo at that point, based on if there is tensions between Kosovo and Serbia, the difference in the ages that are joining our activities changes. For example, when it is more calm, then we have young people that are born between 98, 2002, 2003 who joined. But when there is more violence or more tension, higher tensions between the Kosovo and Serbian countries, we see younger people that are born maybe after 2005. And usually this happens because, from my experience again, that they hear less and less about the stories of the war. And so in their families, it's not talked as much as it was immediately for generations that were born after the war. And I believe that going through this, it's a really important step for them to challenge themselves, for them to meet each other, to break down this barrier that is created between young people from other communities in order to really move towards reconciliation and trying to build a peaceful environment to live in for all of us. Thank you, and looking forward to any questions.
The young doesn't only give us hope, but they make it. Thank you so much, Ariane. We do have, miracle, we do have a few minutes to, I see that Alireza already answered the question privately. Do you want to share it with the audience, or you want to just, I don't know what,
yeah, I mean, I can. I didn't know even that I shared them privately.
no, I said question and answers is at the end. So at any rate,
Yeah.
Feride, there are in our the audience has the same admiration of you that all of us do. There's a lot of expression of admiration and gratitude for your work, which is so profoundly deserving. So thank you. That was the majority. And there were two questions from the audience that that I thought, wait a minute, I guess, Alireza, you already answered. I'm a bit confused. Dean, are you still here? If Dean, Rabbi, if Dean is still here, would you give him the floor to ask the question so Alireza can answer, so that everybody can gain from it, so it's not just a private exchange? Here is Dean. Thank you. Go ahead, dear.
Okay.
Rabbi, go ahead, Dean. Dean is on the board of our center and a very wonderful Croatian colleague that I'm sure all of you know as well. Go ahead, Dean. You had a particular question to Alireza. Go ahead.
Actually, this was a question that Alireza and I have discussed in the meantime. I was puzzled a bit by the fact that they found that PTSD prevalence among the young people who have not really survived from the exposure to war trauma was considerably higher than their parents who have been exposed to that. And what Alireza said, that it may be that they were puzzled too, and that it may be that the young generation was more exposed to potential traumatic experiences resulting in such high PTSD prevalence, which may be something to discuss in the future, and we may stay in contact and look into that. But that was basically the essence. The other thing I believe is that the last presentation was really a great finale to this webinar, because it was about breaking down the prejudice, the anger that was mentioned, that was transmitted to the new generation through these activistic efforts, and I congratulate you, Ellen.
Thank you. Alireza, do you want to add to your answer to Dean so that everybody gains from your answer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Dean already summarized. I mean, we were also a bit puzzled with the findings of having higher PTSD among the youth, but also what we found out also that the youth reported higher levels of like traffic accidents, injuries, and assaults which might have impacted the elevated levels of PTSD symptomatology. So, I mean, other than that, we looked at other factors, but one thing what came out clearly was the PTSD level also of the parents. So nothing more to add than that. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's another question along the same line. That was not Dean's, but Ramjier.
Yeah.
He said, "Hi all, thank you for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be present, etc. Currently reading my master's in public health, and I'm very interested in the issues of bullying among adolescents in Kosovo schools. My question is, how does this level of intergenerational trauma impact the bullying experience in Kosovo schools? Are there any current studies interlinking war-induced intergenerational trauma to bullying rates in Kosovo schools?" Okay, so you answered him too. You said, no, we have no studies. Right. I suggest that the Danieli inventory might shed more light on these issues than rates of PTSD. All of the questions that you ask, really, because they're not on the PTSD dimension, they're not even on the epigenetic dimension. It's almost like these are pathology indications, okay? And we have to explore the rest of the dimensions. Otherwise, we are always just believing instead of factually giving the data-based answers. So in a sense, I feel very energized that because I believe there is a way to answer many of the questions. We just had to put in the work. And I know the Danieli inventory is long, but I don't know how to make life, talking about the issues we talk about, short. They're not short issues. Wisdom takes time. Okay, just having this amazing webinar, right? It's so much wisdom, so much to learn from. It simply means that we have a lot more to learn, but take the time. We can't just rush through everything all the time. We really need to take the time, ask the question that will give us the answers, okay, rather than whatever is available. So the issue of bullying, I would go absolutely with the Danieli inventory and with the bullying measure and do the careful correlational work. Because bullying is a relative of war, isn't it? It's a way to beat somebody. It's a way to humiliate somebody. It's a, right, the powerful versus the powerless. It's a little window of what war is about. So how about if we study it seriously rather than just so all I'm saying is let's take the time. And maybe because Dean also attended, as I challenged him at the board meeting, we have the Balkans. Maybe we should make another meeting in the Balkans. I remember we had an excellent meeting in Slovenia. I don't even remember, 20 years ago, maybe. I think it's time to have to revisit. Because I remember, as long as I live, in 1985, we had a meeting in Zagreb of the World Society of Victimology. And I gave a presentation on what we learned about children of survivors of the Holocaust. And I said to people, if you don't learn from it, it's going to, you'll have another war. And I said that in 1985. And I hate to be right when it's terrible things. So maybe we can really organize. So Feride, Alireza, how about putting the time to organize a major meeting? Because each one of you spoke about different methodologies, different ways of looking at the same problems, right? Go ahead, please, Feride, but unmute.
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank you, all of you who participated in this webinar, those who really bring peace of Kosovo in intergenerational trauma, but a special thank you to you, Dr. Daniel, and also to Dejan Hajdukovic. I have to share a piece of history, maybe 2 minutes. Dr. Dejan Hajdukovic, his wife, and another Croatian psychologist that I don't recall the name now, they were the first one who approached us in Albania and provided some psychosocial intervention tool to the children with UNICEF. So in order to move from Tirana to work in the border with children, I had equipped myself with some knowledge based on these 3 days trainings. We had it in that time in Tirana. I think it was January or 1999. And from that time till now, I see time to time in different occasions, Dr. Daniel, but thank you very much for that support. And it was the first guide for me to enter in this field. Of course, later on, we had to go through different trainings, but I just wanted to mention. Secondly, I think bullying and intergenerational trauma, it is related. I think there is somewhere a study which was studying family of children of veterans and martyrs. Yep. And it was related to trauma and bullying somehow, but I don't know that if it is. Yes, exactly. So we are willing, Dr. Daniel, to be part of Yeli, just in a sign of respect and humble for all of your experience and dedication in this work. So we are willing as an organization, and we have close cooperation with Dr. Alireza, with Rabba, with Yeta, as well as a new person, Arian, who is with us here. So we are planning to work with the schools now. We are planning to train psychologists. So maybe in that perspective, we could see how we could cooperate more with the school system, education system. So whatsoever could come as the initiative in the group, in your board there, we are open to see, to find a way to implement, because it is so important to dig more the intergenerational trauma, not only from perspective of epigenetic methodology, but also through different instruments as it is Daniel inventory. So we are open. Already with Dr. Viola Dave also, I have spoke with her, and we were supposed to meet in this October. I was just exchanging some messages right now. She is planning to apply this inventory, so we will work with her in this perspective, because children who are traumatized either directly, either indirectly, either through the mother, they need to be explored and investigated with different research methodology. So we are open, we are here, we have a university here with Dr. Aren Leo, we have youth generation, we have Rabba, so we just need good initiative to design it. And as you said, wisdom takes time, but we are open, and there is time to reflect and work more on that.
Fantastic. And I'm waiting for an invitation to visit again. We have a question from Fatmir. Hi, as an educator, you want another webinar, dear. He wants to know how cognitive behavioral therapy is adapted for transgender youth experiencing PTSD. It is another webinar. So I don't want us to pretend that we can answer wisely in 1 second. So we would leave we would leave that for another webinar. There's a question whether this will be recorded. Absolutely. You will have the recording with all of the people who register, receive the recording automatically. Otherwise, it will be on the center's website as long as we live. And some of you, as long as the center lives, and some of you might know that this webinar goes to, this webinar, as many of our webinars are assigned by professors around the world to their students to learn, which is part of what the center is about, right? So people can compare Kosovo, Rwanda, right, Ukraine, etc. It's so interesting. The title of the webinar included the reference to the times we live in, including Ukraine, etc. We didn't even have time to bring that up, and I knew it because we needed the focus on Kosovo. But our upcoming webinar will be part of our reparative justice series. It will be number 5. It's coming up on the 26th of June, which is International Day of Support for Victims of Torture.
Torture, yes.
And we have a special webinar on that. So please, we will receive the flyer at the end of today or tomorrow morning. And please stay with us. And then in July, we will on and on and on. But I look forward to, first of all, I want to thank you again. Rabbi, you did a brilliant job bringing brilliant people together. Thank you so much. And we continue. Every webinar is not the last time we meet. It's just opening the door to the next time. So feel free to make suggestions, etc., etc. I'm so happy to have met each one of you. By far, Rabbi is the only one I met in person, so I look forward for that to be repaired. And I look forward to our future work together. I promise the audience that each one of you will give a last word. So, are you ready? Feride, what's your last word?
Well, I already said my last word. I'm very committed to work in this field. We have already 25 years this year also working in this field. On October, we will have our anniversary, and I would like to welcome you and others to join us because we would like to share lesson learned, do's and don'ts of our work on those 25 years in order to serve as a knowledge generation for those countries who are facing still conflict-related sexual violence, but also to see the deep down consequences of this crime. So we are really looking forward to see how we can join our forces to contribute on this field, as well as to share those learning experience with those who are still facing with conflict-related sexual violence.
Thank you, Alireza. What message do you want to leave people?
So I'm really pleased that I was part of this panel. It was really pleasurable to listen to the panelists and looking from various perspectives, from sociological, activist perspectives, Rabba study, which I'm familiar with, and the great work that Dr. Feride Rushiti and Chukwuemeka are doing. So basically, I will just leave open that our Department of Psychology, Institute of Psychology, will remain very open to follow up on different studies, research, but also why not, as you suggested, organizing a regional meeting or on a specific topic. So I, on behalf of my institution and university, will remain very open to this. Thank you so much for this opportunity, to you, Daniele, and to Rabba, and to all other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabba. You have to unmute.
Yes, for me, it's really a great pleasure to be having this discussion in this date, as I was seeing the celebration of the Liberation Day and a lot of people sharing their memories. It is really important for me to have this kind of discussion, to just go back and unpack the burden that we live with every day. Although we had some sort of a victorious celebration today, but still that burden is waiting on our daily life a lot. And for me, it's really important to have this kind of discussion, and I'm pleased to learn that many other studies have been carried out in this topic. And I was really great to hear Aliriza's point on like highlighting that the issue that we were discussing today actually is the root cause of being the root cause of many current conflicts, and I remain hopeful, like everyone else in this panel and like in the society, that we won't be seeing a repetition of anything like that in the future. So it's just an honor, and thank you very much for all your contribution today.
Yeah, thank you, dear. Jetta.
I don't have much to say, but thank you very much. Sometimes with the work that we do, we get a bit constrained on what is the present topic and the present kind of anxiety. So it's good to have all of you for the work that you do, and also meeting new people like Ariane, which I hope we can have a good conversation onwards. This will be very important for us as oral historians, as researchers, as students, and as activists, to really kind of get all of these aspects together and just try to make sense of it in the best way, commemorating the work that has been done before, but also making way for what to kind of clarify better for the future, taking into account, especially what you said about not letting history in whatever form repeat itself, and trying to be ahead of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the young one. Ariane, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have also much to say. I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to present my experience and my story in front of so many amazing people. And also it's really important for me to always mention how important it is for young people to really step up and talk about these topics that even sometimes they might be not really common and not really accepted by the general population, but still it's very important for young people to step up and take a stand on this.
Absolutely. Thank you. We continue. Take care. Bye-bye.